my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Yovanov, and we are heading out to the west coast of the U.S. today, L.A., specifically North Hollywood. It is a beautiful 21 degrees, 69 Fahrenheit over there for our American friends, and in Toronto, it is just above freezing. So I wish I was there right now. We are speaking with today Elise Dewsberry. Elise, thank you very much for coming on today.
You're most welcome. I know it's a little chilly here. I had to put on a sweater. I don't want you guys in Canada to, be envious or anything. But no, what can I say?
Yes, you just made a number of enemies here in Canada again. So. Well, Elise, thank you for coming on. And whenever we do an interview, I always like to get a 30-second bio from the person I'm speaking with. So in 30 seconds, tell us who you are.
Okay, well, I'm Elise Dewsberry. I am currently the artistic director of New Musicals, Inc., and we are situated in Los Angeles. And we are a developmental organization that works with book writers, lyricists, and composers to help develop new musicals. We have a curriculum. We produce things at the Hollywood Fringe Festival. I do a la carte dramaturgy. We're very busy here developing new musicals. It's wonderful. My background is that I actually started my performing career in New York, but then very quickly moved back to Toronto, which is my hometown, more or less. Yes. I'm an American, a transplant, but I moved when I was a kid. So I was in the Toronto scene for many years, doing the circuit of all of the summer stock theaters around town as an actor, and got involved in the Muskoka Festival as in their musical theater writers colony, which led me down the road of dramaturgy and new works, and eventually to where I am today.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And the reason I contacted you was when I found New Musicals online. I went, I have to talk to you people. And then when I found out that you spent time in Toronto and you can list all this stuff, and I'm like, I know everything she's talking about. And I think when we talked offline before, you were at Stratford, and I think I probably saw you in one of the shows.
That's possible. I was in HMS Pinafore in 81 and the Mikado in 82, and met my husband in 81. We got married in 82 and moved to New York, and he was a cellist with the orchestra, and he's still a cellist out here. So yes, I got my equity card at Stratford. Nice. And shortly after that, I founded Script Lab in Toronto, which was an organization that did readings of plays, musicals, and screenplays. And I ran that for 10 years until I moved away from the city.
And I might have gone to one of those too. I'm not sure anymore. But let's take it back. And before we get to talking to the New Musicals Inc. and all that sort of thing, I want to know a little bit more about you. Have you always been into musical theater when you were a kid, or is that something that happened later in life?
Yes and no, a bit of both. I decided in Toronto at the age of 10 that I wanted to be an actor. Mm-hmm. I was taking an after-school creative drama class, and a friend of mine who was taking the class said that when she grew up, she was going to be an actress, and it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and I said, "Oh, you can do that?" And I decided then and there that that's what I wanted to do. I actually studied at the Royal Conservatory of Toronto. Most people think of it as just lots of people do piano exams every year. Yeah. And I think a lot of people in Toronto did that when they were growing up. But they also have a division for speech arts and drama. Really? And so I went through the whole thing with exams every year, and I'm officially an ARCT, an Associate of the Royal Conservatory of Toronto in Speech Arts and Drama. I didn't finish it up until I went away to college, because the final exam involves, it's really quite extraordinary. The final exam in drama musical theater, in speech arts and drama, they call it there, besides all the other things you have to do and two massive written exams, you also have to prepare a repertoire copybook of, I think it was 25 monologues ready to go. They all had to be ready because when you went in for your final exam, there were 3 or 4 monologues that you were going to do for sure that you knew, but then your examiner could leaf through your book of 25 monologues and just say, do this one. So that was quite something, but I loved studying that. So, and then when I went to college, I went to the Boston Conservatory of Music, which, again, it's a music conservatory, but I went there as a drama musical theater major, and I got my Bachelor of Fine Arts in drama musical theater there. I liked the school, and I really had never thought about musical theater before I went to college. Before that, when I was studying in Toronto, I was an actress. I was a Shakespearean actress primarily. I did a lot of Shakespeare around town and different kinds of, when I was very young, I mean, like teenager. And then I took singing lessons, and I sang church solos and did solos all over the place. So I sang and I acted, but I never put the two together. And somehow it sort of escaped me that those things could be put together, until I discovered this drama musical theater course at the Boston Conservatory, and I got very excited about it. So that was the first time that I really studied it. I continued to study voice in the voice department there, and I studied acting in the theater department, and I also then got to add dance. We became triple threat. So I would not say I'm a dancer, but I'm a mover from my years there. So that's really when I started doing musical theater and fell in love with it. And then wound up moving back to Toronto after I graduated, got my equity card at the Stratford Festival in the chorus of the Mikado. So that really firmly established me as a musical theater performer.
Yes.
And then wound up at the Muskoka Festival doing a new musical. It was the first time I was pretty snooty at that time and was only interested in, the canon.
Yeah.
And it didn't occur to me there was such a thing as a new musical. But you may not remember, there was an organization called Comus Musical Theater in Toronto many years ago. And one of the things they did was they were going to do this for years, but the year I did it may have been the only year they wound up doing it. They hired, I guess there were 6 of us, 6 young actors who were right out of college. So we were all about 24-ish. And they actually paid us $100 a week for 10 weeks. I remember that very clearly because it was the first time I'd had, money to, well, it wasn't the first time I'd done some summer stuff before, but and what they had us, we produced in that 10 weeks, we produced 2 musicals, and we had classes and stuff during the day. They were trying to turn it into a big training program thing, but that never happened. But the 2 musicals we did, one was Canterbury Tales, which was an existing musical, but the other was a musical called Wine, Women, and War by Jim Betts.
I know
someone
Jim
you
Betts.
may have heard of. Yes, and I think it was Brian Nazimuk who was his book writer on that one. And so that was my first taste of new musicals, and I got introduced to them with playing the lead in a Jim Betts musical that was based on Lysistrata. And I played the character Lisa, and there were only 6 of us, but it was about these 2 warring towns, and one had water and one didn't, and the character of Lisa decided to withhold sex in order to get the water. So I thought it was a fantastic show. I absolutely loved it, and it really awakened an interest in me in new work. And so when I went to I auditioned for the Muskoka Festival. I was living in New York by then. I had gotten married, and my husband and I immediately moved to New York because I wanted to make it in New York. But I still had an agent left over in Toronto, and she got me a meeting with Michael Ayub, who was the artistic director of the Muskoka Festival at that time in Gravenhurst, which was an equity company for many, many, many years. It's really sad that we lost that one. It's a beautiful theater. I remember very clearly going to meet Michael because they had just lost the lead actor in the new musical they were going to be doing that summer because she got pregnant. Her name is Suzanne Bennett.
Oh yeah.
And she and Ralph had recently been married, and she was pregnant with their daughter Tova. And so she had to drop out of this show that she was going to do because she was due in the summer. So suddenly they had this opening, and I went to see Michael, and as I was coming up the stairs of where his office was, he yelled down the stairs and he said, "Is that Elise Dewsberry?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I've been told that you're very good." And I said, "Well, I hope so." And he said, "Well, you better be." And so he hired me to play the role in that, and that was also a Jim Betts musical, interestingly enough, and it was called Thin Ice.
That one I don't know.
Oh, you don't? Oh my God,
No.
It's such a fantastic show. And all the sort of regulars were in it. It starred Avery Saltzman, and David Nairn was in it, and Sean, I'm trying to, some of the rest of the names will come to me.
Yeah.
And Ralph was in it, Ralph Small. So Suzanne spent the summer up there pregnant. The funny thing is that about a month after I got the gig, I discovered that I was pregnant.
There's something in the water up there.
but I was not due until October, and so I was able to do the show. So I wound up doing Thin Ice, and once again a Jim Betts musical, and then I got cast in Colors in the Storm. I was in the original cast of Colors in the Storm with Jonathan Whitaker and Suzanne and Ralph and David Nairn. It was quite the group. And Shane McPherson, that's the other one who was it. That was our group. And Michael A. was the one who said to me, I think that you have the capability that you might have an interest in dramaturgy. I didn't even know what the word meant. But the reason he brought it up is because in rehearsals for new musicals, I was always very adamant and very loud-mouthed about what I thought my character would and wouldn't say or do, and then I would get pretty mouthy about what I thought the other characters would or wouldn't say or do. And so Michael said, you might have a knack for dramaturgy. So he actually helped me get a grant through the I think it was a Ontario Arts Council, and to apprentice as a dramaturg at the Canadian Stage Company.
Nice.
And under Iris Turcotte, which was just so, I was so blessed to be able to apprentice under her. And I became their full-time dramaturgical associate. And that really launched my interest in dramaturgy, not just for musicals, for everything, but it was when my husband and I decided to move out to LA, and I discovered this organization, which at the time was called the Academy for New Musical Theater. And they were, interestingly enough, looking for a dramaturg. So that just worked out. And I've settled into my primary job now is doing dramaturgy on new musicals. And I love it. It's been a wonderful trajectory.
That's a perfect segue into new musicals. Tell us a little bit about what that is. Right on the website it says, New Musicals Inc., come make musicals with us. Tell us what that means.
Yeah. Well, a quick history. The organization actually started probably 4 decades ago. A lot of people, many of your listeners may have heard of the Lehman Engel Musical Theater Workshop in New York, the BMI, Lehman Engel Musical Theater Workshop. And that was established BMI because the famous Broadway conductor, Lehman Engel, master classes, and people would come and study at his feet. And BMI started to support that and create a space and pay Lehman to do it so people could come and take this master class with him. And it became so popular that it expanded, and BMI sponsored Lehman to have versions of this master class in Toronto and LA, and now, so Lehman would make a circuit. And he'd do a couple weeks in New York, and then he'd go to Toronto, and then he'd go to LA, and then he'd Nashville, and then he'd do the circuit again. And so he developed quite a following. And a lot of the people that are, Jim Betts, Leslie Arden, David Warwick,
huge names,
Joey Miller, all of these people were part of that workshop. I was not, actually. I did not know anything about it because I wasn't living in Toronto at the time. So I missed that. But all those great people, all of whom I have worked with at some point or another, studied under Lehman. And then when Lehman got older and got ill, BMI decided, you can't travel anymore. And so the Toronto group shut down and the Nashville group shut down. The LA group was a little, ornery. And so they raised their own money and to bring Lehman out, which actually caused a rift with BMI, because BMI thought, we said he shouldn't travel, and here you are making him travel. So we don't like you. So it sort of made a rift between the organizations, but they created something out here called the Lehman Engel Musical Theater Workshop. The BMI was not part of the name, and Lehman continued to come out for a while. Then once Lehman passed, because this organization existed, a trio of the people who'd been part of the class for years took it over to run it, one of whom was our founding director, John Sparks. And he maintained it and remained as the artistic director for many, 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 many years. And then I guess it would have been around 2001, they changed their name to the Academy for New Musical Theater to differentiate themselves from the Lehman Engel Workshop, since they didn't have the BMI sponsorship anymore. And and they took on their first full-time employee, which was their executive director, Scott Guy. John Sparks, their artistic director, was always, doing it out of the goodness of his heart and his passionate love for musicals and new works. But they scraped together the money to hire a full-time executive director, and then it would have been just a couple of years later that I showed up in LA and discovered very quickly the horrifying truth when I got here with my husband that a stage actor can't really make a living in LA. I've been making my living as an equity stage performer for so many years in Toronto and across Canada.
Yeah.
But in LA, if you want to work as a stage actor, you have to do a lot of traveling because you have to be going to all the regional theaters. There's only 2 regional theaters here in the city. That's not going to keep anybody employed full time.
Wow.
And most of the other theaters were on what at the time was called the 99C plan, which basically meant that actors weren't being paid. That's a whole other story that we don't necessarily need to get into today. But I was horrified to learn that I wasn't going to make a living as a stage actor. But at the same time, I found this Academy for New Musical Theater and sort of, just encroached and just started doing things and got very excited about what they were doing, and eventually became the associate artistic director and then the co-artistic director. And then when John retired, we still do some of the classes together, but he is the founding director, and I'm now the artistic director, although we still team teach. We still do what we call the core curriculum, which is the same program that the BMI Lehman Engel Musical Theater Workshop does. That is sort of our core program, which means that we every fall we get a new group of book writers, lyricists, and composers, and every month we shuffle them around and put them on a new collaborative team of 2 or 3 people.
Cool.
And give them an assignment, and they go away and write it, and they come back the next month and present it, and we critique it, and give them another assignment with a new team. And we do that for a season. And then in April, their final assignment is to write an original 15-minute musical, which we produce somewhere in town. We rent a theater in town. And we have been doing that for a long, 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 long time. And I've been doing it myself for 15 years now.
Wow.
And so we also, once people finish that program, then we have a general workshop they can join where they can work on whatever they're doing. We now have a Fringe curriculum where people are developing 30 to 40-minute musicals that we're going to produce at the Fringe Festival this summer. We also produce new works on the main stage at the Fringe, full-length works. We have a conference every year. We have a contest called the Search for New Musicals. Anybody can submit a musical to us. It's fee-based because it isn't just a contest. You get dramaturgical feedback on your submission, but then there's also there are some perks too. If you win the contest, you get a workshop and a reading in LA, but you get the dramaturgy, whatever. Yeah. What else do we have? A New Voices project, which is for writers 18 to 26 to try and highlight that group. And I had someone just recently email me and say, I see that you have something for writers 18 to 26. What about us old folks? And my
I was about to say that.
Yeah.
Too.
And my answer to them is everything else that we do is for you. Everything. So yes, we do have a special program for 18 to 26-year-olds, but everything else that we do is open to all ages. Our conference coming up this summer, I'm sort of excited about. We do we call it the Biz of the Musical Theater Biz Conference, so we can concentrate on the business side as opposed to the writing side, and we do that every other summer. And we have panels from artistic directors talking about what they're looking for and how they decide what they're going to produce, and festivals talking about what they're looking for and how do you put a pitch package together and all that kind of stuff. This summer, we're concentrating even more on pitching. What we're actually going to design the conference weekend to give writers the opportunity to prepare and practice a live pitch of their musical several times. And then at the end of the conference, they will get 2, or if I can manage it, if I can schedule it, 3 opportunities to pitch to groups of producers. Because now that we have this wonderful technology of video conferencing, we're able to get a lot of people. We did this 2 years ago when we had our conference. Some of our panelists were, we had a couple of producers from New York and one from Atlanta, and they joined us by video conference. And it was really incredible to be able to include them in our conference, even without them having to come to LA. So that's what we'll be doing. We'll be getting together sort of a big group of producers from around the country, producers and artistic directors, and have them all Zoom into the meeting and take these live pitches that have been practiced and honed. So that's the first time we've done it that way, and I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be the weekend of July, I think it's 24th, 25th, and 26th, and we're putting the details of that together right now. So, and we're also putting together the details of the fact that we're producing 8 30 to 40-minute musicals at the Fringe Festival this summer, and 1 hour-long musical, and we will be doing 7 15-minute musicals with this year's core curriculum and a couple of concerts. So our summer is going to be insane, but we always do that to ourselves, but it's a lot of fun.
That seems you have everything there that a musical theater creator could want.
Except money. I wish we had more money. That's what I would say. I wish we would be doing even more. We would produce more stuff if we had more money, but we do the best we can.
Yeah. You would think that producers would want to buy into this or donate or something like that to, because this is where their future is coming from.
Yeah, I would say we're members of the National Alliance for Musical Theater, which is a national service organization. It's actually international service organization. And we've been members for many years. And so I know a lot of the organizations that are trying to develop and produce new musicals. And what tends to be happening with most of them is that they're doing in-house development for things that they intend to produce themselves. So they aren't generally speaking looking to, I know a lot of them, and so I'm able to send them stuff and recommend stuff and try to get stuff moved to the next leg of the process.
Yeah.
So it's a nice trajectory, and sort of a pipeline. But generally speaking, these organizations are not looking for someone else to do the development work for them, but they are interested in looking at the development work that's being done and then seeing whether or not they can be the next piece in the puzzle in the advancement of the new work.
Nice. Now you said you had that 18 to 26 thing, and then it's open for everybody else. So I'm just curious, have you found there's a difference between someone in their early 20s and someone in their, say, late 40s when they come in? Have you noticed a difference in the way they write or they work or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say in a couple of areas. One of them is that pop music has become so popular in musical theater that I think the writing styles of younger people they have, and I do not mean this in a derogatory way, but we tend to call it tishy, which is the musical theater, the graduate musical theater writing program at New York University Tisch School of the Arts, which is a phenomenal program and turns out absolutely amazing people. It costs a ton of money, but it is really, really incredible, an incredible opportunity. And there's a pop flavor. There's a sort of a conversational, almost, but not quite structureless conversational quality to the writing, to the songwriting that is very common among young writers in general, but writers from Tisch in particular, which is why we here will often refer to them as Tishy. And as I say, I don't mean that in a derogatory way, because I think there's a lot of great writing that comes out of that. Yeah. I think it comes out of a great tradition that I don't know that he started it, but I would say Jason Robert Brown is a master of being able to write songs that sound sort of formless and conversational, and yet when you study them, you see how incredibly well planned and thought out they are, and how effective they are, but still giving you this sense that they are sort of off the cuff and very conversational. Okay, it's really quite incredible. So I would say that more and more, and whereas our older writers have a tendency to be a little bit more quote unquote old fashioned in their, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, because I think there's a lot to be said for. There's a reason that the standard AABA song became wildly popular. It's not like somebody said this is how you must write, so everyone did. It really works in the terms of how songs work in a musical, which is different from how songs work in the pop world, because you have to experience them in the moment, and they have to develop and lead you to a new moment in the musical. They have to heighten the emotion of that moment, and they have to lead you from point A to point B, and you have to be able to understand everything you're hearing and go on that journey and know that something has changed by the end of it. A pop song doesn't need to do that, but a musical theater song does. And that's not to say that a Tishy, musical theater pop song can't do it. I think, but certainly the traditional AABA really does it quite well. So I have nothing against. I think that there's room for all of these styles. That's what's so exciting. Maybe that's the most exciting thing about musical theater these days. Is that there's room for so many different options. But the other thing that I was going to say about the younger writers, which is not necessarily as much of a positive, it's a positive and a negative at the same time. There are so many ways nowadays that people can create music, with GarageBand, and there's so much technology that can help people get music out of themselves without them necessarily having to learn to be a composer and to actually be able to notate their own music. It's a good thing in the sense that it allows these people who clearly have music in their heads to be able to get that music out to the world, and that's a wonderful thing. But it's a negative in the sense that they are limited in their ability to get that stuff to get it down on paper so it can be rehearsed and realized, and a lot of that then falls on the people that are doing the development to try and hire a good music director who can just sort of figure out what's in the writer's head and try to write it out for them. And I lament our loss of the great composers who could sit down at the piano and play a beautiful song, and they would hand notate it. I remember when I worked at the Muskoka Festival, and we would be working on, I worked on, in the Musical Theater Writers Colony, I worked on the very first rendition of Kathy Elliott's Fireweeds.
Oh, yeah.
And I was the dramaturge and director on the project, and I met Kathy through that, and we remained, very close friends all through her life. And we were working with Stephen Woodgets, who is an extraordinary music director, and I worked with him on many things, and he's absolutely extraordinary. And we would go to the restaurant, across the street on a break, and Stephen would sit there smoking a cigarette, because it was those days when you could do that in a restaurant, with one hand, and with the other hand, he would be scribbling on score paper. He would be writing out parts for the band by hand, because they did it by hand then. I remember one time doing a workshop of a David Warwick piece, and he was off doing something else. He faxed us some handwritten music that he had scribbled on a napkin and then faxed it for us to use for rehearsal. Now, that had its own problems inherent with it, I will say. But the fact that so many composers today aren't, the music is in their head and they can get it out through GarageBand, but they can't necessarily get it on paper. That's a real problem for our program. We can't accept people into our core curriculum program who can't notate their music, because we need to have a music director, a pianist, be able to sit down and play the music.
Yes.
And if there isn't something written down, they can't do it. So and we're finding it's harder and harder with our younger writers to find the ones who are able to do that. It's a problem because and I've said this for years, we learn everything that we need to be a book writer or a lyricist. We learn in school because we learn spelling and grammar and sentence structure, and everybody learns that. So that you can then apply that. We don't learn the basics of music theory and harmony and and everything that a composer needs. That's not part of standard education, and so that means somebody has to go and get it. And I would just say that I'm glad that everybody has these amazing tools at their fingertips to get music out of them, but I would encourage them not to let that make them bypass learning how to actually get that music down on paper. Yeah. Because development opportunities will be easier and people will be happier to work with them if they don't have to go and pay tons of money to somebody to try to figure out how to get that music in a rehearsable format.
Yeah, I have this conversation with my kids. They're younger, but I sometimes say, music is getting less and less complicated, and it's all sounding the same. They're like, oh, no. I'm like, no, it is, guys, because, and like you said, they're all using GarageBand, and there's only a finite number of things. And if you're all using that, you're all going to start sounding the same. And like you said, I remember when I was writing my show back in, I don't know, it was the late 90s, I guess, when the technology came for be able to put the notes into a computer, that made such a difference.
Oh yeah.
I'm terrible at writing it out. Like I can play the piano, but putting it in straight into the computer, just even one note at a time. Like
It's amazing. And then you can change keys with
exactly.
the click of a button. It is really pretty spectacular.
Yeah,
Yeah.
technology's made life so much easier
Right.
too. But
But
like you said,
it is a lovely thing when someone has the ability to write a beautiful melody.
mhm.
That's lovely. And if they can harmonize it, if they know what chords to add to it, that's the next step of being able to create something that's not just a melody,
Yeah.
but actually is starting to become a song. But the next step is really important because just being able to write a melody and attach a handful of chords to it is not really being a composer,
Yeah.
because there's so much more to a song that makes a song work. If you really sit back and listen to the songs you love, it isn't just the melody, it's everything else that's going on. And yes, when you get to a Broadway production, you'll have a whole music department
Yeah.
that does all the orchestrations and all that kind of thing, but the best composers have all of the seeds of what is going to become the
Yes.
orchestration in the piano vocal part when they write it right from the beginning.
Mhm.
And it makes a huge, huge, huge difference. So I would just so encourage people to never forget that that's what a song is. It's not just a melody and some chords. There's a lot more to it. And you don't want to pay someone else to fill that stuff in for you, because then it's not your work.
I know I have trouble with, I can write out the melody and the sound, but to fill it out, I need somebody else. But at least
Yeah.
there's something there, right? You know,
Yes, you need to
basics.
start somewhere, but
Yeah.
but I think it's well worth trying to go beyond that and try to figure
sure.
out at least
Yeah.
A hint in your piano vocal part of
Yes.
what you know the orchestrator then is going to take and go, oh, I see that little trill there in the right hand
Exactly.
of the accompaniment in between those, the A and the B section. That's going to be the trumpets, or
Yeah.
whatever.
They're not creating, they're filling it.
They're at least they're creating from a base that they know is
Yes.
coming from the composer. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question. This is more for your personal opinion about this. Like my opinion on lyrics. I find pop lyrics and pop rhymes, they just drive me crazy. Like, ask you a question. This is more for your personal opinion about this. Like my opinion on lyrics. I find pop lyrics and pop rhymes, they just drive me crazy. Like, what happened to the good old days when words actually had to rhyme and you couldn't just,
Yeah.
like, this is your opinion. I'd
Yes.
love to hear it from you rather than.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. It's we sometimes wonder here if we're fighting a losing battle, but we're going to continue to fight it.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Yes, pop. In fact, in the pop world, near rhymes or slant rhymes are encouraged because pure rhymes sound cheesy and corny.
Yeah.
In a pop setting, and you're more looking for what we would call euphony, which is where the vowels of the word combine with each other in a way that makes them sound similar, and it doesn't matter so much about the consonants, and that's fine for pop. The thing about me, here's why I think musical theater rhyme really should be pure, and I would encourage people to do their very, very best to make their rhyme pure in musical theater. It's what I said before. When somebody pays their money to go sit in the audience of a dark theater and watch a musical, they only get one shot. They're not sitting in their car listening to a song 1,800 times and still not actually understanding the lyric. Imagine how many pop songs you know where people argue about what the lyric is because you can't quite tell, but
Yes.
even though you've heard it 1,000 times. In a musical, you need to hear that lyric in the moment that it's happening while you're watching the show, or you don't understand the story. And conversely, I would say if I can understand the story, even if I don't get the lyrics, then there's something wrong with the song, because that means that the song is generic and it isn't specific and it isn't necessary. So if you have any pride about your lyrics and feel like they are important, then you're going to want people to hear them. And rhyme and structure help people hear things. It can't be any simpler than that. It just helps people. That doesn't mean that you have to rhyme all the time or to do all these clever triple. That's wonderful and it's fine, and it really should only be if you have a really witty character. Even Song laments how much rhyme and clever rhyme he wrote in a song like I'm so pretty from West Side Story, because he knows it wasn't appropriate for that character. She didn't have that kind of diction. So, and I feel the same way. So rhyming purely does not mean rhyming cleverly or rhyming often. Yeah. You could have, 2 rhymes in your whole song for all I care, if that's the way the song works. Or all your rhymes could be very gentle, what they call invisible rhymes, that are not calling attention to themselves because they're not clever. but they still help us hear and understand in the moment that it's happening. So I will always be a proponent of pure rhyme, and I will say anyone who says that they don't care about it, I would challenge them to think about whether they don't care about it or whether they're just too lazy to do the work that it takes to do it right. So
Yes.
if they're resorting to a slant rhyme because it's just easier, then that's not a good enough reason in my mind.
Yep. Good. I like that answer. It's some of the things have been bothering me over the last, as music theater has progressed. I do love the fact that you've probably seen it over the 15 years you've been there, the variety of musical styles that have come out. You used to always just have, you got the Rodgers and Hammerstein style, right, from the 50s, and then you got into the 70s and the 60s and 70s, and you got more pop and rock, and then you got some country thrown in randomly, but now we've got everything, and you must see that a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's great. I absolutely embrace that. I think it's fantastic. I think anyone who's writing in a style or a genre that isn't doesn't have its roots in musical theater, I think they have to sort of reimagine that particular style of music and understand that in a musical, we have to be able to hear it and understand it, and it is part of a story that's being told. And so the key is not to just take a style of music and throw it at a musical, but to figure out how to adapt that style of music so the listener feels like they're experiencing that style, but they're still getting the story that's being told. And I think that's the key is musicalizing the styles and understanding what their purpose is, so that they retain the integrity of the style that they come from, but they also accomplish the purpose they need to within a musical.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so happy to see so many different things out there.
Yeah, no, I think it's great.
Because I've been listening to a lot of new stuff. I'm like, wow, okay, that's very cool. We got some like I've got one musical in my that we play. It's a combination of the characters are one's from Jamaica and the other one's from China. So the musical combination is just
oh wow, yeah,
crazy.
It opens up all kinds of amazing opportunities for the cultural the music of the culture to be it, and it becomes part of, as I say, part of the storytelling, because their cultures are going to be part of the story, and there's no reason why the music shouldn't participate in that. I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, I love what's going on right now. So like I said, you've been around there for about 15 years. Some of the shows that have come through there, have any of them, exploded out there into the musical theater canon? That you can
I wish. I can't say that anything has made it into the canon. Okay. Several things have wound up being produced. We helped develop a show for East West Players out here, which was the local Asian theater group, and the artistic director there wanted a musical about Imelda, so we helped him. We dramaturged and helped develop a musical called Imelda that they did at East West Players, and it was their highest grossing musical in their entire history at that point. And it wound up going not to Broadway, but to one of the more regional theaters there in New York, and had a little run there. Nice. There's a writer who came through our program by the name of Kellen Blair, who's one of the two people who wrote the musical Murder for Two. Okay. That has been off Broadway and has had productions all over the world, really everywhere. Yeah. It's even been translated into different translations and has been all over the place. He did not write that or develop that show here, but he learned how to be a lyricist here. Nice. He came here without any lyric training, and I think he's one of the best lyricists out there now. His name's Kellen Blair. He's really quite awesome. And then we've had a partnership with an organization called Northern Sky Theater that are in the park in the northern part of Wisconsin. In the pub, and they have an outdoor theater there where they do nothing but new musicals every summer in an outdoor setting. Yeah, it's called Northern Sky, and we have developed 3 musicals that they have produced there. They have very specific needs in terms of length and number of characters, and the fact that they have a very large audience from children to grandparents. But we've developed 3 that have been produced there, and another one that's in the works. So we've had those kinds of partnerships. We're still waiting for the one. We did also do a production at the Fringe Festival 3 years ago, of a new musical called Manson's Girls.
Yes, I
Which
saw that on
is,
the website.
yeah, it's pretty amazing, and people get the writers got death threats actually, because some people
Wow.
feel like you shouldn't write a musical about a serial killer, um, the musical is told from the point of view of the women who were part of the family, and it's meant to be a cautionary tale that sort of alerts us to how susceptible we are to
Yeah.
the charisma and charm. And when you turn yourself over to someone and and do whatever, like there's a song that says, you'll do whatever Charlie says.
Yeah.
And if you turn yourself over and allow yourself to be led by anybody, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And so, this is just, you really need to be making your own decisions in your life. And in some instances, like with Charles Manson, you're really, really, really in trouble. So
Yes.
that's really what the musical is trying to say. But it did incredibly well at the Fringe Festival. It was very well received, got all kinds of awards and great reviews, and is now it's optioned for a production here in LA. And they're just sort of trying to figure out a theater for it. So we're hoping that will move forward. Yeah, there was a more family oriented show we did last summer at Fringe called The Bully Problem, which is based in a middle school, and about a bunch of nerds that get bullied, and one of them creates a robot to protect them. And it's adorable, but it also deals with the topic of bullying, but it's really sweet, and it's got a great pop score. And it also got lots of awards and lots and lots of great reviews. And so we're hoping that will have that might be the kind of show that could get published and be done, in the sort of school circuit. We'll see what comes of that. We're doing another show by the same writer this summer that's being, getting its second and third drafts right now, called Gideon and the Blundersnorp, that we will be premiering at the Fringe Festival this summer.
Wow.
That's another thing. It's aimed at a young audience, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a musical quest story, but at the same time it's meant to teach sort of empowerment of believing that you can be whatever you want to be, and you don't have to be trapped by what society tells you your place in society is.
Wow, there's so many great shows out there that unfortunately
Mm-hmm.
are not going to be seen by
Yeah.
so many people. Like for example, I was putting together this week my Sampler Platter, which is a show where we focus on new musicals or lesser known and promote it and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading about it, and then it was the Flesh Trade.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
So they said, oh yeah, we were part of the stages and
yes,
and
they were at our Stages Festival last year.
Yeah, so it's just
yes, that's a musical about cannibalism.
I know. I read it and I listened to it and I was like, okay,
wow. Pretty wacky. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, there's so many different things out there. Manson family, cannibalism.
Yeah. Oh my God, yeah.
Bullying. There's so much stuff, and it's unfortunate that more theaters don't take a risk, and I understand why they take a risk. It's economic.
It is
to put on one show that.
It's very tricky for them. Musicals are simply more expensive to produce than plays, and then a new musical is harder to sell. I think most theaters are happy to do existing musicals or musicals that have some kind of hype, because they know that musicals sell. But new musicals, it's about audiences. It's about what we have to. This is more about audiences than anything else. Audiences have to be convinced that to see something new is exciting, and the theaters that have been successful are the ones that have committed to training their audience. One of the biggest examples of that is the Village Theater in Issaquah, New York. In Issaquah, Washington. It's near Seattle in the state of Washington. And they won the Tony, I think, for best regional theater a number of years ago, and a number of amazing things have come out of there. Next to Normal came out of there. A Million Dollar Quartet came out of there. The list is longer, I'm sure, but they started many years ago with a summer festival of new works, of new musicals, and encouraged their local audience to become members. I think they call it friends or family or something. They actually become a member of a community that comes to see these, and they fill out forms and whatnot about the work, and then the theater listens to that, and some of those shows graduate and go on to the main stage. It took them probably literally decades, but their audience is hungry for new works and excited about them, and and proud of the fact that some of these works have then gone on to Broadway and to great success.
Yeah.
But the theater has to make that kind of a commitment and know that it's not going to happen overnight, and they have to commit to giving their audience a taste of what a new musical can be, and letting them feel like they're in on the ground floor and that they actually have something to say about what's going to go forward and how it's going to go forward.
Yeah.
Goodspeed musicals in Connecticut has the same thing. They have not on their main stage, but on their second stage, they do lots of new works, and they train their audience to be interested in those, and they have a festival. And
that just happened, didn't it? Like
there's
week.
Right. Theirs is usually, because they do it over the summer. They have a lot of artists there who are doing the shows on their main stage, and that means that over the winter they have all this housing for artists that's empty. So they thought, perfect, let's get some artists in here and develop new musicals and have this festival and use all this housing. They have a retreat for musical theater writers there, which is awesome because they have the space to put them. And there's nothing like being stuck in a cabin in Connecticut in the winter to give you lots of time to get your work done. But they've made a commitment. Goodspeed has made a commitment to developing the works and finding a way to get it to their audience, even though primarily the stuff they do on their main stage is still the established work, because they know that's going to sell the tickets and it pays for the rest of the development work.
Yeah. We got to find more theaters that are willing to take a risk. I know how hard it is.
It is, yeah.
And now, how about schools? Because I know my alma mater, Sheridan, is doing a lot of that
course,
stuff.
yeah. The Canadian Musical Theatre Project at Sheridan, headed by Michael Rubinoff, is absolutely spectacular.
Yes.
I was lucky enough to spend a little bit of time there. It must have been 3 or 4 years ago when I directed the reading of the Moll Flanders musical that Leslie Arden and Kathy Elliott were working on at the time. Leslie and Kathy are, as I say, really good buddies of mine, and two of the best musical theater writers I've ever known in my life. I'm sad we only have one of them left. Leslie is absolutely extraordinary as well, so she's a treasure. So the work they're doing there, what's incredible about that kind of work is that these students, these musical theater students, some of them undergraduates, some of them graduates, are incredibly talented.
Yes.
And it means that all the resources of these talented people and all the resources that the school can bring give a writer a wonderful opportunity to develop. We were able to rehearse with those kids, 8 hours a day for 6 days a week. And we were even able to say, take a day off because we're going to go back to Leslie and Kathy's farm and rewrite, this scene, and then we'll come back later with new material for you. And it was, and it's a luxury that usually a theater that's working with equity actors cannot afford.
Yeah.
So it's an absolutely extraordinary thing. There is an American musical theater project at Northwestern University in Chicago that has a similar thing. And in fact, Leslie's show, the boys are coming home, I think it wound up getting called, which is a musical version of Much Ado About Nothing, which is a fantastic show, got a production there at Northwestern University as part of the American Musical Theater Project, which is a very similar program to the Canadian Musical Theater Project. Yeah. And there are other universities that don't necessarily have as fully developed a program, but there are a lot of universities around the United States that are very interested in development work and will bring a team in and give them an opportunity to workshop and get a reading of their musical. And many of those organizations belong to NAMT, to the National Alliance for Musical Theater. And so, if anybody's interested in finding out, how to find them, just go to the NAMT website and find some of those schools, because they're a lot of them are actively involved. We had a relationship here with UC Irvine, which is in Orange County. Mm-hmm. It's a bit of a drive here from LA, but we can get there. Yeah. And they have a wonderful program there, a graduate musical theater program. And we did, for several years, we did a musical theater festival every fall where we would be working on new musicals, 3, 4, 5, 6 new musicals that would get readings that would be produced by the school and by these students. And it's just, I can't even talk enough about what an incredible opportunity it is for musical theater writers to get that opportunity that is so hard to come by just because of money in any other setting. So those are fantastic outlets.
I wish they'd been doing it when I was there. Now they did do it a little bit, but Like I saw like Sheridan did do, even back when I was there in the mid 90s. They did actually do once in a while a new show that they'd write. Marathon of Hope, the Terry
Hmm.
Fox show, was just after I left.
Oh, right, of course, yeah.
And I saw that and was like, this is
Hmm.
so good.
Hmm.
And then I've never seen it really go anywhere after
Hmm.
that. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's
would
it's
love to be
unfortunate.
involved.
They'd had nothing like that when I was at Boston Conservatory, and that's part of why I came out of there with this snooty attitude that I only wanted to do the musicals that were in the canon, because I'd never been
Yeah.
exposed to a new musical. So once a university student gets a chance to create a role and be the first one to speak those words and sing those songs, it's a bug that gets into you that you cannot let go of.
Yeah.
It isn't, and I'm lucky enough to still get to do it here, because even though I'm the artistic director and I'm the dramaturg, I also get to be in the shows sometimes. In fact, I'm going to be in a reading that's coming up next month. We're doing a reading of the work that won our search for new musicals last year. It's called Entertaining Murder, and it's by a British writer by the name of Chris Burgess that we've actually known for years, and he actually won the search with a different writing partner a number of years ago with a show called Emerald. But this is a new one, and he won the search this year with this one. It's called Entertaining Murder. It's about a woman by the name of Edith Thompson, who was hanged in 1922 in London because she was found to be complicit in her when her lover murdered her husband. And there was a lot of it was considered a cause célèbre at the time. Like, did she really know about it, or were they just trying to punish her because she was a bad girl and she was having sex outside of marriage? So he's written a song cycle for 4 characters, and he actually asked me to be in it, to play the role of the writer, because he knows my work from the past. So I'm excited about that, because I get to create roles, and I like nothing better now that I long ago lost my snobbishness. My favorite thing now, I'm actually not terribly interested in playing a role that already exists anymore.
Yeah.
I only want to do a role if no one's ever done it before, and then I get very excited about it.
Nice. I loved finding those new songs. Like, even when I was back at Sheridan, I was always choosing the shows that the teachers would go, where did you find this? Like, nobody else was singing. Everybody was singing at that point, Les Mis, and et cetera, et cetera. I found stuff from Celebration, and like, they're still in the canon, but not ones that anybody does.
Right.
So that's probably that's why I love new musicals, and I focus on that with the radio stations. So you're doing a great thing out there, and helping so many creators get a chance to get these musicals and hone them, and hone their talents, and get them out there.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I love it. There's nothing better than having your life filled with music. It is a gift.
It is. Well, Elise, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about New Musicals Inc. and your life and all the stuff that you've been able to do. You've done great things. But before we go, I do always ask my people I interview 3 questions. There's always 3 questions. There's no right or wrong answer, but there is a wrong answer, just to let you know. All right?
Okay.
So the first question is always, Weber or Sondheim?
Oh, well, there's no Sondheim. Sorry.
No, that's okay. And why Sondheim?
Well, he's just brilliant. Sometimes people say that will complain that his songs are too cerebral, and that they aren't emotional, and I totally disagree. His songs make me cry and weep. There are such amazing things, and I saw the first production, Broadway production of Sweeney Todd, and sat in the very front row and watched Angela Lansbury and Len Cariou, a Canadian, and be brilliant. And I actually got to talk to Sondheim about it, because he came to LA. I guess it would have been 8 or 10 years ago now, when he was on a circuit of doing interviews in different places, and we knew he was coming to town, so we asked him to come and speak to our writers, and we rented a theater, and we literally sold it out in 30 seconds. We crashed the internet, and we got to ask him questions. And because my colleague Scott Guy and I picked him up at his hotel and brought him to the event and brought him home, we got him alone, and I got to ask him the question I'd always wanted to ask, that I didn't think I should ask in public, which is that when I saw Sweeney Todd with Len Cariou, there's a moment at the end when he has when he sort of accidentally kills the beggar woman because he's in a hurry because the judge is coming, and then he pulls her out of the oven and finally realizes that it's his wife, Joanna, and he has this moment where he he's lamenting this, and Toby comes up out of the sewers, and his hair's turned white, and he's crazy, and he's singing patty cake, and he comes up, and he's got a knife, and I could see that Len Cariou saw him coming out of the corner of his eye, and he pulled himself up. He was sitting on the ground holding this body of his dead wife, and he pulled himself up and held his neck high and just offered his neck to Toby. For Toby to slice him, and I thought that is brilliant. And then I got a hold of the script, the libretto at one point, and there's no stage direction that in any way implies that Sweeney knows what's coming. And if you watch the taped version that they did of the Broadway show, which was Angela Lansbury and George Hearn, George Hearn doesn't do it. George Hearn doesn't, as far as I can tell at any rate from watching it on the video, it looks like George Hearn's Sweeney doesn't see Toby coming. So I asked Sondheim, I said, is he supposed to see him or not? Why? And Sondheim immediately said, oh yes, of course, because he knows his life is over. There's no point in living. And I said, but there's no stage direction that says that. And he said, really? Well, there should be.
That's so funny.
Sondheim all the way for me.
Okay. And the funny thing is that comes out to about a 55-45 split.
Really? Surprising.
Because it just depends on, if I'm talking to people in Britain, it's a little bit different. If I'm talking to people who are more into the pop stuff, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Both
I think it's not, here's what, I think Weber is brilliant in melody. I think his songs are brilliant. I'm not always so fond of the lyrics unless he's working with Tim Rice, but it's the storytelling. So you can't necessarily blame Weber for that. I think his storytelling just isn't as clean and clear. We could do a whole podcast on my feelings about Phantom of the Opera as storytelling, but we don't need to do that now.
See, I love asking this question because the reaction is so visceral and honest, and that's why. But it's worth saying that my objections to Andrew Lloyd Webber is not as much about him as it is about the storytelling of his shows, and I think that's because people concentrate on how brilliant he is, and they think they just put any story up there and it won't matter, and it does matter to me. Yeah. That's why I love just asking that question. It's just fun to get the reactions. I know there's no comparison because one does one and the other does the other, but it's still fun. All right, question number 2. So that one was right or wrong. There is no right or wrong for that one. There is. There is, but in case Andrew's listening, there isn't. So.
I don't blame you, Andrew.
All right. Question number 2. I had an idea, but I'm going to modify it a little. The difference, what kind of differences do you find between American and Canadian musicals? Because, for example, just throw this out there. Whenever I always compare Come From Away and Hamilton. Could you have more quintessential musicals that reflect their countries? The way they're written and just the everything about them. Do you find the differences?
Wow. Well, that's a pretty strong one when you mention that. But I think there's as much diversity in Canadian musicals as there is in American. So if you pick two that are so far apart, then the comparison is clear. But I don't think that means that Canadians aren't capable of writing something with the impact of a Hamilton, or that Americans aren't capable of writing something with the emotional level of Come From Away. Those obviously are two that are sort of the pinnacles of their areas. But for instance, I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to see The House of Martin Guerre by Leslie Arden.
That I think is getting a concert production in the next month.
Maybe it actually got produced by Theatre Sheridan last year.
Yeah, I know.
I flew up to Toronto to see it because I never miss it. I was part of the original development through Script Lab, and I have seen every production of it, including the one at the Goodman in Chicago that won the Jefferson Award, and the one at Sheridan last year. That is a musical that is so powerfully emotional. that, I don't think that you can't say that a Canadian can't, although whoops, Leslie's an American, but only by birth. Let's say. She has really spent her whole life in Toronto, so she's she's more of a Canadian by nature, but even though she's an American by birth. But so that show has the depth and the emotion and the scope of Hamilton, even if it isn't hip hop music, but it has that kind of depth and emotion. And there are I don't know if I can bring one to mind immediately, but I'm sure there are plenty of American musicals that none that are going to reach the level of Come From Away. There's something very special about Come From Away, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things that are also very moving and lovely and important. So people have asked me this before about the difference between Canadians and Americans as well as people. And here's what I tend to say about that. I don't find that, having lived half my life in each country, I don't find the differences to be as strong as people have told me. What I have found more is that there's a big difference between city dwellers and non-city dwellers. The sort of snobby, elitist city folk that we are, that have a certain way of being, and then the people that have the more laid-back sort of country style of life. And I think that that's true in Canada and in the U.S., the division between urban and rural. For sure. And I think that's a lot. But otherwise, I think people are people. And, of course, people like to talk about how nice Canadians are. And I suppose there's a basic truth to that. But there are plenty of nice Americans, too. And there are plenty of not nice Canadians.
Yeah, for sure on that, too. I was just thinking, if you had to say, pick a musical that reflects a country and the way they are, I just say, Come From Away reflects. Yeah. And then Hamilton just reflects how America is. And for England, I'd be like, I don't know, Starlight Express. I don't know.
Oh no!
Well, after Brexit, Starlight Express is the perfect description of it.
Oh dear. Well, you just lost all your British friends.
I know. I'm gonna have to. Oh well. They've said stuff like that too, so we've been okay.
Okay.
Well, then, as a subsection, not American Canadian, but Toronto, LA. Have you found differences there?
No, the same thing is going to be true, because I lived many years in Toronto. I lived many years in New York. I lived many years in LA. I even lived a number of years in Boston. And I'm going to say the same thing. I think city folk and non-city folk are more similar than people think. People like to have stereotypes of what they think a New Yorker is or an LA person is. And certainly some people meet that stereotype, but I don't know. I think people are just people. Yeah.
Well, I did an interview with a guy in New York who's half Canadian, so he spent a lot of time in Toronto, and he says, he brought this up. He said, the difference is, it was in Toronto in the summer, and he goes, hey, it doesn't smell like pee here everywhere. So I didn't prompt him. He brought that up. But.
That may be true. But that's not about the people. But
it doesn't. But
when my husband and I drove to New York with our daughter when she was 8 or 9 years old. She had been born in New York because we'd lived there until she was 2, but she didn't really remember it. And we went back to visit once when she was 10 or 11, and we drove into the city in the middle of the summer with the windows down in our car. And we're like, yay, we're showing our daughter New York. We love New York. And she looks out the window and she says, it's dirty and it's smelly and it's hot. And it's loud. That's what it was. Dirty, smelly, and loud. And my husband and I looked at each other and said, yeah, that's true. but we still love it here.
Yeah. Well, I went in October, and being in New York, everything's so fast, and I don't know how bicyclists not get killed every second and everything like that. And I was home after a week, downtown Toronto, went, where is everybody?
Oh,
I was like, we're all waiting on the sidewalks to cross.
Well, that's true. That's true.
It's just interesting to see that.
But anybody who tries to say, for instance, that LA traffic is the worst in the world, have you been on the 401 during rush hour? So come on.
I know. I hear about LA. I want to drive it just to see if it is.
Well, I've driven both, and rush hour is rush hour. And in Toronto, you have fewer options to get where you need to go. Here we have a whole lot of freeways, so if one's busy, you can try another one. You're stuck in Toronto, and you're just going to sit.
Well, try talking to a person from Ottawa. I lived there for 4 years, and they go, oh, it's terrible on the 417. I'm like, dude, you've been sitting up for 6 minutes. This is not a backup. So it's all perspective.
Yeah, true. You are.
Okay, and final question, maybe the most important question.
Okay.
Audience members eating food in the theater, yes or no?
Oh God. Um, that's a tricky one, I guess. Yeah, because I do remember I worked several times at the Lunchbox Theater in Calgary, which is a fun little lunch, and it's a lunch theater. People come,
Yes.
they specifically are supposed to bring their lunches, and I had a full dose of having people sitting in the theater, opening up their box lunches and popping their pop cans, the tabs, and it can get pretty noisy. And of course, I've done cabaret where there's a lot of noise and people are ordering from their waiters and whatnot. So as a performer, boy, I wish people weren't eating out there.
Yeah.
I would have to say.
But with the lunch theater and the cabaret, it's going to be happening. Like, at
Yes.
least you're okay with it, because
Yes.
Yes. But if I'm sitting in the Pantages, it's
I
not
know.
Pantages anymore, whatever it's called,
Yeah.
anywhere. Whenever I finish a show, I always take pictures of the ground, because there's always so much garbage everywhere, and it drives me insane.
That used to be the excuse in theaters for why they didn't allow food, was because of the amount of work it would be to clean it up. It was not so much about being nice to the actors. But I guess what has happened over the last number of years is that they've decided that the amount of money they can make on the concessions outweighs the amount of money they're going to have to pay to clean the carpets, which is too bad. But that's what it is. It's about the merchandising.
Yeah. I saw SpongeBob, a matinee, in December, and afterwards it was disgusting. And I went, oh my goodness, they have to clean this up in 2 hours to get ready to start again. And I was like, no, I do not envy those people.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's another thing too, though, because there's no reason, just because you're eating in the theater does not mean that that you should be throwing your food around. And that's another issue with people who feel like they can't clean up after themselves. It wouldn't be so much of a problem if they would just take their garbage to the garbage. It's not so hard. But anyway, that's another story.
Yeah, exactly. Well, those are my 3 questions, and you got them all right. So congratulations. Thank you so much again, Elise, for coming on and talking to everybody about New Musicals, Inc. And is there anything you want to end with and leave us with about New Musicals, Inc.?
No, I would just encourage anybody who hasn't had the opportunity to see a new musical, find one and go to it, because there's something incredibly exciting about being part of something that's beginning. And I would encourage people, not when you're trying to decide what to go and see, don't think about, I don't know that, so I won't go see it. Take a chance, and I think you will be pleasantly surprised at the amount of good work that's out there and how exciting it is to be part of something new.
I couldn't have said it any better. Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. That was Elise Dewsberry on Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanov. Come back next week, as we'll be talking to someone new from the musical theater community. All right. Come back then. And until then, I'll see you when I see you. We love supporting and promoting the creators of musical theater throughout the world, and we would love to have your support as well. Go to musicaltheaterradio.com and click on the Become a Patron button, because a supportive community is a strong community.